Well, after months of football, it's come to an end. It's time to start breaking down what happened this Phoenix Rising season. Well, that was the season. That was the season that we witnessed.
Yeah, 34 matches, a playoff game, and 2 Open Cup games.
There we go. There we go.
Survived.
We got to the end of it. We got to the end of 2024. I'm Owen Evans. Rees Goodall over there. We are your supporters correspondents for the night. Phoenix Rising season has come to a conclusion. It is time for the PHNX Rising post-mortem of this season to start. Now, there are so many aspects to this. I think we will be discussing this, quite frankly, for a few weeks, because there are so many different areas that you can go into, so many different things that you can kind of pick away at and see, you know, where did things go wrong in this area, in this area, in this area, because, wow, it just was, I think, all around one of those seasons that you frankly really want to forget, coming off of not a good one for Phoenix Rising. They end up sneaking into the playoffs just about in 8th place, fall at the first hurdle in the playoffs to a rival, no less, in New Mexico United, and just didn't really come to very much in the end. The Campeones tour falls flat. Rees, just overall, give me whatever, the brief description from your mind of this season at large.
Every single game was the exact same story, it felt like, and this New Mexico game was no different. And it started from the beginning of the season, where they scored 1 goal in the first 4 games, and that carried over for the rest of the season. They struggled to create chances all season long. And I was thinking last night, we could have picked one of the post games from any of the matches in this season and replayed it for that game, and it would have been the same story. The struggle to create chances has been something we talked about, honestly, since preseason, that they just didn't have the players, they didn't have the striker to do it. And it's just a failure this entire season in my eyes.
It is. Now, you look at the stats from last night. They've changed, obviously, the way these stats happen. They tend to change. Phoenix Rising ended up with 15 shots in total, but only 6 of those on target. It all adds up to less than 1 expected goal for Phoenix Rising. And it's just one of those games where, yeah, right, it typifies everything almost that we've seen from Phoenix Rising this season. A team that, even if they have some semblance of ideas about what they want to do, but they don't really have the personnel to go out and do it. They didn't go out and get those personnel in the offseason. They didn't really fix the problems for the mid-season acquisitions. They didn't go far enough in terms of fixing the problems that they faced. And so you end up at the end of the season with this disappointment, going away to a New Mexico team that, quite frankly, I think in the first half didn't really want to be in that game. They were quite happy to sit back, let Rising have all of the control of that match. New Mexico offered nothing for 45 minutes, and despite the fact that they were away to the number 1 seed, who chose, surprisingly in my eyes, I didn't expect that quite from them, to offer nothing for 45 minutes, Phoenix Rising couldn't capitalize.
They couldn't. And I was looking at the touches and passes that Tomas Angel was involved in, and it was shockingly low. And same for Edgardo Rito. Angel had 22 touches the whole match, 4 in the box, 3 in the first half. The touches were just not there. The service was not there. They could not get anything going in the final third. And for me, I talked about it last night. We talked about it in the preview for the New Mexico game and the preview for the regular season New Mexico game, is that if you get shots on target against Alex Tambakis, good things can happen. He might let it slip by, or the rebound might come right back to one of your forwards. We saw that last night when Fede Varela slotted home. but there just weren't that amount of shots on target that you need to see in a game like this.
They weren't. Shout out everyone in the chat, by the way, enjoying the engagement already. Obviously, we'll get into some of the bigger questions around this team as the show goes on. We want you guys to hop in there. We want you guys to get involved. We appreciate you guys. By the way, if you aren't already a diehard and are interested in signing up and taking advantage of our introductory offer, it's $4 a month for your first year. That offer ends tonight. So when we say limited time, it is a very limited time. Gets you access to all of the content on the website. You get a free t-shirt when you sign up. You get access to the Discord, which gives you another place to vent, to maybe bully Max. We always say that.
Yeah.
It's always good to get an extra, especially since Mr. Vacations isn't here, today. You can always ask him.
Is he still on timeout in the chat?
No, I think that ended last night. It was timeout. It was like a very brief thing,
Well, that's a shame.
It just thankfully stopped him from going on about no free ads. So, I'm just saying, sometimes that helps. Look, last night we're saying it's an encapsulation of just so much of this team. I think this season at large, and it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's frustration. I think broadly speaking, a feeling, and in a lot of these games, there's a feeling that it's not like someone's come along and just beaten you to death over 90 minutes, and with the exception of a couple of games where often they have been outmatched by very, very good teams in this league. Louisville, perfect example. Memphis put that performance in, even though they're not really that caliber of team, but they did put that performance in. But we haven't seen too many of those. It feels like most of these games have just been ones where you get to the end and go, I don't know if they fully deserve to lose that game, but they also never seemed to do enough to make you feel like they were confidently going to win any game.
Yeah, and you could say that for the draws they've had this year too. I mean, I just counted 5 0-0 draws on top of and they had 4 more draws too. Not many of them you can think of that Rising deserved the 3 points in. I mean, it was just struggle so much this season. And I mean, yes, there were some draws against some good teams like Charleston and Tampa, but neither of those teams really offered much in that game. You could say that was Rising shutting them down, but I don't believe that. And it's just, there were so many games this year that were just boring to watch. On both sides. And I think sometimes we've seen in the chat that people say Rising play up or down to the level of their opponent. And I agree in cases. And it's just finding a consistent level is going to be a key part of this offseason, in my opinion.
Right. And I do wonder if sometimes just, the way that those 0-0 draws, you mentioned Tampa, you mentioned Charleston, right? Sometimes staying in some of those games maybe creates a false hope.
Yeah.
It made people think this team's a little bit better at times than it was. You have to remember that in both of those cases, Tampa Bay and Charleston both came into Phoenix, and they were in a period of time where they were struggling.
Yeah.
Both of the teams. That wasn't like they just came to Rising and struggled. Both of those teams had troubles with goals at times during the season. Tampa Bay had a real struggle there. Charleston at one point, Ben Pierman was throwing a lot at the wall, just trying to find out what was gonna make this work. He had so much talent there, and I mean, in the end, the talent prevails. And frankly, at the level of talent they have there, with guys like Nick Markanic available to them, it makes sense. I mean, I'll go in the chat now for some of this. Thomas there with can't remember a match this season where I felt we were going to win before the ball was kicked. I mean, to be fair, I think once the season started and things really got underway, that is how a lot of those games felt. I mean, Bandidos Billbed says Rhode Island away, Danny's first win. The only time it was Danny's. Wasn't Danny's first win.
First away win.
First away win, yeah. The only time I believe we would win pre-game. Yeah, I suppose, but even then...
That's not because of what Rising was, more because I think Rhode Island expansion side, like their 8th match, 9th match.
It was early doors for them.
Yeah.
It was just one of those ones where it was a struggle for this team, I think, so much throughout the year. Confidence plays in, they had pieces there. They had, I think, an idea of where they wanted to go. They wanted to be a side that were going to be willing to possess the ball, but that also had some direct options that they could go to. They wanted to be a side that were going to, find ways from a possessive phase where they've got that ball for so long, they're going to still find a way to get a good shot off in there. But just never did it. You know, maybe one or two complete performances in there over the course of an entire season.
Yeah.
And that's about it. I mean, San Antonio probably won. Rhode Island was a decent result, I thought, away from home. A bit defensive at times. Rhode Island had a few chances. There was a safe penalty in there. But at the same time, Rhode Island's goal came in the most bizarre fashion ever. And Rising immediately followed it up with another one to just completely put to bed any idea of a comeback there. You know, even against teams like Miami, who have been historically dreadful, Rising only wins that game 2-0.
Yeah. That one just was not convincing at all, because that was the Open Cup week, right? They had the one, I think it was Seattle or North Carolina the week or the Wednesday after, but still, just you really, I don't even know if you can really point to that San Antonio match as one they really dominated. They were clinical, but they weren't. I don't think they were levels above San Antonio. They just took their chances, which is something they didn't do the other 33 games.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And I mean, even as you look then, we look at the latter stages of the season, right? And people will bring up, you know, Rising finally starting to find their feet in terms of getting goals later on in the year. Maybe not a lot of goals, but they were getting some goals, especially after that stretch where they just couldn't score at all. They went 4 games without scoring a goal. Yeah. But you see Loudoun with the 1-0 win. They beat Tulsa. They beat San Antonio in a pretty decent victory in that one. New Mexico away, Oakland away. But even if you take that whole stretch from Loudoun until the end of the season, Rising lost more than they won.
Yeah.
They didn't draw at that point, which is a large part of what helps them in terms of keeping themselves afloat and managing to get above the playoff line. But they didn't win more than they lost. So even at that stage of the season, it's not as though things truly turned around. They just got more bearable to the point that this team was able to finish above. I mean, there's so much in this. I'll tell you what, let's start with it from the coaching perspective. And obviously, Rising had 2 coaches this year. It comes after Juan Guerra departs right before preseason kicks in. He moves on to Houston Dynamo as an assistant coach there. Phoenix Rising go with promoting internally. They take a couple of weeks to kind of finalize that. They go through a process. They end up, in that case, promoting Danny Stone from within. He takes charge of the team for the first 17 games. They get rid of him. They say things were going in the wrong direction. We're bringing an interim in, but we're also not going to rush to making a decision on a replacement. They gave Diego Gómez at that point the interim head coach, who was an assistant coach brought in at the start of the season after Danny had been promoted. They give him until the end of the year. He does 17 games plus the playoff game. In the end, both coaches end up with the exact same points over the exact same number of games. So things didn't really get better after the point that Danny Stone was let go. The question I put to you, Rees, is what do you think in terms of the timing of that coaching change? And was that the right time, do you think? Was it maybe premature? Was it too late? Was it, I don't know.
I do think it was too early. I mean, I remember talking before or around that Memphis game that the seat's getting hot, but it's not hot enough that you're going to fire him. I mean, there was the bye week after that San Antonio fixture. I figured that if they had lost that San Antonio match under Danny Stone, then it would have been not right to, but I could see a case being made to firing Danny Stone then. I think firing him in June, that's too early. I get it's the halfway point of the season, but if you don't have a long-term replacement like you did in 2022 when Rising brought in Juan Guerra, that's just too early. Just kind of let it ride out. Maybe you find good form, maybe you don't, but then you can always fire him again or fire him later. But I think then it's just too early.
It's worth noting actually when you look at the table, right? And obviously, again, we put it in the context of Rising at the exact same number of points after firing Danny Stone as they did before firing Danny Stone. Right at the halfway mark is when they fired him. Yeah. So it didn't have the boost I think that they were hoping for. Phoenix Rising were in 7th position at the point they got rid of him. They finished in 8th, so they finished lower down the table than they were. I'd also point out that Danny Stone has gone on to Orange County. He moved there as an assistant coach. He ended up taking over
Yeah.
as an interim head coach there. He's currently leading them. They're in the second round of the playoffs. They are on a very good stretch right now. They're probably one of the best formed teams in the league right now. Just in terms of the sheer lack of goals they're conceding and the way that they're finding ways to grind out results. They are playing very well under Danny Stone.
Yeah.
I mean, when you break it down, I think from Rising's perspective, yeah, you probably did, I think, at that time have to move on at some point. You were going to have to move on from Danny Stone. The comments there in terms of the locker room, were they behind him, all of that kind of stuff. I mean, there was enough smoke, I'd say, coming out of that locker room that yes, that was there was substance to that. Things weren't in great shape. But it's more, I think, just the way that everything went about it. It was a half season long interim that rightly or wrongly, you can believe in Diego or not, but this club needed, I think, direction. It needed also a degree of direction with almost the impetus to actually implement your own things, right? Diego comes in and implements elements of his own style, but it was never a long-term plan, and it couldn't be. By its very nature, it couldn't be. This guy's the interim head coach, right? There's only so much you can do tactically when you're an interim.
Yeah.
You can't bring in all of the guys that you're going to want to play your style of football because you could be gone at the end, in just a couple of weeks. At any point, you could be gone in a couple of weeks. The way that they just kind of hung on, it felt to me largely as though the approach just gave a feeling of not really caring in the end what happened this season.
Yeah.
Signings were made. They were made probably with an eye more towards the future than anything. Yes, I know you're big on Joe Margarita. There are other people who are big on Joe Margarita as well. There are some people who are saying that more recent Darius Johnson performances as well are probably looking a bit better.
Yeah.
They bring Thomas Angel in. That one doesn't work.
No. 15 games, 3 goals, final stat line there.
Yeah, and 2 of those were penalties.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. That's not the season defining striker that you were trying to bring in when you were really struggling to find goals. But yeah, it just felt as though towards the end of things, it was like, just keep your head just above the playoff lines. We can say that we made the playoffs. And then you just accept what happens from there on. Now, wow, it was a season on that one. I will say some of the comments in there. Banditas Bluebirds saying Bobby and Brandon never supported Danny. Their unwillingness to recruit forwards for him says it all. There was a comment just above that one from Fat Kid. Took too long for confirmation of Danny, giving the wrong signal. Always saying they were looking at so many options, yet we settle for an interim coach with Diego. Thomas there with we were cooked from the start. Also saying that Joel and DJ make it into Rising's team of the season, even with how late they came into the team.
I don't know if I'd argue with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that, well, Jill definitely does.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would with DJ.
Yeah,
I guess
just because the minutes weren't quite there.
Minutes weren't really
quite
there.
A few games,
the final actual, there was not necessarily as much actually product that came out of it. You saw, I think, potential for next season that you hope that can be built on. What you didn't see was a finished product from him this year.
Yeah.
But so much of that, again, just the way this team has been in flux. And that ended up coming in, I think, ahead of the playoffs as well. And we discussed this last week when the news was broken by Tom Bogart that there is a new coach coming in. For that to break the week of a playoff game, the week you are going into the playoffs, that your interim coach is a lame duck. And I think from everything we saw, from the words, the mannerisms, everything from Diego Gómez after the game last night, I do think that his expectation, at the very least, is that he was saying goodbye. Last night, to have that come out in advance is, I mean, it's just a risk that you're going to take when you leave things to go this late. It's not viable to expect that you're going to keep a lid on everything when you get into this late stage of the season as well. When people will have rationales for why they want information like that to get out there. I mean, it also helps because, look, you've got firings right now. Okay, Mark Briggs let go today by Sacramento Republic. If you aren't if you don't really have a manager in place in your Phoenix Rising, do you look at Mark Briggs? I know there are people in the chat who'll probably say they don't want that. I'm sure somewhere Michael Vanderplas will be maybe who we're watching this tomorrow
This is his
or
bat
later,
signal. Yeah.
and he hears Mark Briggs to Phoenix Rising, and that one just utterly utterly would set him off. I can tell he's probably not watching live because he'd be in our chat right now going off about it. But
yeah,
it's one of those things where I don't know. I just felt like so much of this season after the firing of Danny Stone became almost an exercise in kind of going through the motions, winding down the clock, hoping you can make it look vaguely respectable by staying above that playoff line. And then you just kind of say, well, we made the playoffs, time to move on. And for a club that is defending a title,
yeah,
that's a shocking approach to take.
And that's not what Phoenix Rising is. And I mean, this team hasn't hosted a playoff game since 2021.
Yeah,
that's 3
terrible.
straight seasons.
And the context to that one is that when you don't host playoff games in this league, you do not make money.
Yeah.
When Rising won the title last year, all on the road, right? It's this fairy tale run. It's all the exciting, good vibes, everything. They lost money doing that run.
Yeah.
Playing playoff games on the road does not make you money in this league. You need to play them at home. That boosts finances to get those home playoff games. They're critical in this league. You don't have the big media contracts. You know, sponsorship is what it is. This league is still heavily reliant on people actually coming in, showing up, getting into the stadium, buying tickets, spending money in the ground. That's a big part of the finances for clubs at this level. And to go as long as they have for a club that has never shirked away from spending money on players like Phoenix Rising has. Now, obviously, some teams say they have the biggest budget in the league. We don't believe that. Everything that we've heard doesn't tell us that's not quite true. But they're up there.
Yeah.
They're not a team that refuse to spend big money on players. They can't afford to lose money by not having games played at home and to not even be in contention for that come the end of the season. To not even be close to being able to hosting a playoff game. That tells you something.
Yeah, I mean, this season, there was serious talks about Rising missing the playoffs again. I mean, after that Monterey Bay loss, we thought, oh, they could be done. They could be done. And yes, they followed up with 2 straight wins, but still, this team has not hosted a home playoff game in feels like ever. I mean, the league has changed so much. Yeah,
it was
they're
RGV.
not here anymore.
Club no longer exists, by the way.
Yeah.
They folded. Penalty shootout in that one. Look, you're talking about the thinking they might miss the playoffs. In 2022, they finished with the same points haul as they did this year, and they missed the playoffs with that points haul. They didn't make it in. They were 4 points adrift that year. They'd have been 4 points adrift even if the top 8, it wasn't top 8 that year, it was top 7. But even if it was top 8 like it was this year, they'd have missed playoffs by 4 points.
I don't even know what to say anymore. I mean, so the 2 seasons are, I mean, I think the thing that kind of drives me nuts the most is seeing what Vegas did this year. And you wrote about that. And it's just, they put it together in such a short span, and now they're into the conference quarter or
semifinals. Yeah.
Jeez, can't talk there. But that team put it together out of nowhere. This is their first ever playoff berth. They have been, to put it nicely, poverty in this league for years. Okay,
they've been the laughing stock of the league, right? Under Brett Lashbrook, they were a circus.
Yeah.
That club was the running joke.
Mm-hmm.
They did nothing by the league handbook. They ignored everything. They had kiddie pools on the touchline for a laugh. I don't know why.
Cornhole, Joey Calistri
the cornhole
celebration.
tournament. Yeah, that was an experience.
Yeah.
Remember when they used to invite cars to go park on the pitch behind the dugouts? Yeah, that was great.
Didn't Manuel Madrid get hurt on the mattresses?
He did
year?
once. Yeah, he went into one of those
Nightmare.
mattresses. It's bad, right? And that club was a joke. everyone viewed them as a joke. Brett Lashbrook sells up this year, and suddenly they're taking things seriously. But part of that is, as you said, they blew up that team, and in 6 weeks they had a brand new squad that not only qualified for the playoffs for the first time in Las Vegas Lights history, but they managed to qualify for a home playoff game in the first round, which ended up going the distance against Sacramento Republic. They won that one, so their first time in the playoffs, they've won it. Well, they've advanced. I shouldn't say they've won because, of course, as we know, penalty shootouts take place after the game has ended for statistical purposes. But it's just night and day when you compare that with the kind of excuses like Carlos Harvey left late in into the build up to the season. We'll get into, I think, certain elements of that a little bit later on. I will just bring some people in from the chat here first. Bandidas Bluebird saying Campeones tour more like the Chumps tour. We got some comments there. It was Alex Shattuck a little bit further up saying, I'm guessing Teflon Twins there is a reference to the club president and the sporting director. Saying Teflon Twins time to go. There's a lot of anger in there. That's not the only people I've seen calling for people to go in there. Thomas saying the league level back then was lower compared to today. Look at his time at Monterrey. They're talking about Patrice Carteron. I think a lot of chat in there. Patrice Carteron obviously came in to manage Phoenix Rising in 2017, left in 2018 for Al Ahly, and left that team that Rick Shantz went on to take to the club's first ever USL Cup final back in 2018. That was a team with Didier Drogba and multiple other very good players for the level at that time. That was a very, very different squad back then. Very different league, quite frankly. It's
MLS
definitely changed
teams,
quite a lot. MLS teams. Well, 2018 was just a look at some of the teams that were in there. There's so many that just aren't around anymore.
33 total teams. Let's see, Red Bulls or FC Cincinnati gone, Red Bulls 2 gone, Bethlehem Steel gone, Nashville gone, Ottawa gone.
That was also the first season that USL had a full Division 2 sanctioning from US Soccer. By the way, which is interesting. But yeah, you're right. There's so many teams. I mean, Bethlehem Steel. Remember Bethlehem Steel? Charlotte Independence down in League One. FC Cincinnati, Fresno, they're gone.
I think 10
Galaxy
of the
2.
17 Western Conference teams are gone.
Oh,
I think.
so many.
That's just
so
totally different.
many. What a
fun
there
league
was
we watched.
17 teams in the Western Conference that year. 17.
I did like that format for 18 and 19 where it's the 17 teams you play every team in your conference home and away. No one from you.
Wasn't that? No, they did when it was 18. They did that when it was 18 because that worked then for 34 games. Yeah, that was a nice. I like the current schedule, but I like that.
Yeah,
I like that as well. Right. Well, we're gonna get into some of the other. Obviously, we've discussed the managerial change and in particular this playoff game that's just gone. We'll get into some more about just bigger decisions from the club as we come back from this break. But first, we've got to talk to you about our friends at Branded Bills. So, Phoenix Rising let you down this season. I think there's no getting away from that. We said this yesterday. You know who won't let you down?
Branded Bills.
Branded Bills. There we go. We got the hats. Have we got some around here still? Yes, we do. It's not in the camera right now, but there is an ASU hat back here. I can't reach back for that right now. We do have Eric's coming up to hand it over to me. Here we go. See, we don't want to get the U of A one because U of A being who they are, we don't really need to talk about them. I think Damon would come over here and have some comments to say, but
56-12 is all I have to say.
But it's always good stuff. I mean, I've got one of these back home. I managed to grab one of these from Max. Definitely wear it around when I go out. Went out to a game wearing one of them, and they've got all kinds of stuff there, no matter what you like to wear. They got the snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, all kinds of good stuff and all kinds of fun designs. You can get 20% off your first order at brandedbills.com using the code PHNX. And also, if you had to witness that game in Albuquerque like I did yesterday, Circle K, they came in clutch. They came in clutch when knowing that everything else in Albuquerque, that beautiful city in New Mexico, was going to be closed, we did manage to hop on over to the Circle K, got a box of beers in, and some of the boys, we decided to have some beers back in the hotel. Good value, much cheaper than going to the hotel. But hey, you can also get soft drinks, because Rees, of course, can't drink.
Well,
he's not 21.
Big Polar Pop guy.
No, he's a big Polar Pop guy.
Unnamed soda.
Big Polar Pop guy. Any size Polar Pop, 79 cents. You get all other kinds of discounts as well when you sign up for the Inner Circle program. Save 25 cents per gallon on those first 5 fill-ups and 3 cents per gallon every day thereafter. Lots of member exclusive deals and discounts as well. You can join the Inner Circle for free by downloading the Circle K app today. Terms and conditions apply at participating locations, and visit circlek.com for details. Okay, Rees. So we kind of touched on it a little bit with the Carlos Harvey talk. With the fact that they didn't replace him. He was obviously a big part of that midfield. Which, won the title. Physical player, also had a lot of kind of, forward-facing drive, right? He was the guy who really just a really physical playmaker in the midfield. And in a lot of ways, Phoenix Rising did not have that kind of a player this season.
No. You know who kind of played that role this year at times, or kind of had that ability? And no one's going to like me saying this.
What are you going to say?
Lawrence Weick. I thought...
I can see it. The issue is he just doesn't...
He was played more on the back
positionally,
line.
It doesn't work out. If you don't play him in the midfield, it doesn't work in the same way. I mean, a big part of the lack of physicality, what was lost from not having Carlos Harvey around was the fact that you didn't have a midfield that was physical enough and had the positivity to play forward balls, to pick out runs going forward in a way that Carlos Harvey would have done. It just didn't come together, did it?
No. I mean, at times we saw a midfield this year of Renzo Zambrano and Jose Hernandez, and like in the opening game of the season, no offense to either of those two, but that's not an optimal midfield. That's just not the same as having Carlos Harvey back there. And to be honest, I feel like Carlos Harvey leaving is not flown under the radar, but like compared to the struggles in the attack, we've kind of let that one slip by us. But it's still, his loss, it was huge this season. And I don't think we can understate it for all the guys that left, to be honest.
I think it's what led to a lot of the wasted possession as well, because there was a lot of the time, at times, just an unwillingness to just ping that ball forward, find the run. I mean, that was a big part, I think, of last season, was the ability for a guy like Carlos Harvey to pick out Danny Trejo, say, making a run. We saw that happen quite a few times. That was really pivotal to just let you change the game in an instant in a way that this team didn't manage to do. Now, look, when things were going well, do you have someone like a Charlie Dennis who's going to find spaces in between lines to make things happen? Yeah, he's yes, but it's not quite the same way. And I also don't think that he ever played as consistently as we saw Carlos Harvey play, which is also another part to this. Yeah,
and sometimes with Charlie Dennis, we saw him play much deeper and much higher. It was kind of weak when he first came in. It was week to week. It was a different spot in the pitch he was playing. I kind of prefer to see him higher up, more similar to how Danny Stone would play as number 10s, but still, he's not the same profile. He delivers something similar in the final third, but the rest of the pitch, it's not the same, and they just could not find that missing piece there.
Yeah, so go and look at the chat right now. You went in there with Harvey consistently playing in MLS. He is indeed up in Minnesota. Banditas Bluebird saying Renzo is not appreciated enough, though. I do understand that. I think he's been a very consistent player this season in terms of what you're getting from Renzo Zambrano. The problem is you need, I think, other people alongside him to, bring out the best in him and frankly make up for certain elements in his game that may be more limited. While he'll give you a lot in some areas, he's not going to be the most aggressive, forward-thinking midfielder. That's not who he is. You need someone who's better placed to do that alongside him, and he fills in other roles in there in terms of being good at maintaining possession, holding up at times, decent always in winning the ball and giving you a bit of a physical presence in the midfield. Thomas saying Harvey was a diamond in the rough. Look, one of the other things that gets to me over the Harvey move is that it was said to me by a senior person in the club in San Diego for the opening, like one of the first games of the 2023 season, that they knew that Carlos Harvey was a guy who was kind of in between levels. Yeah. He was better than USL Championship. He just wasn't good enough to be playing consistently at that time in Major League Soccer. That is kind of why it takes me... I just don't understand why they were so surprised in the end that the interest came, and that when the interest came, they were realistically going to have to accept and let him move on. Now, Carlos Harvey was a guy who he had some goal contributions in there, but obviously if you're looking at goals and other players who moved on, that's one of the other big issues that Phoenix Rising has had. You look at players who left from last season team. Danny Trejo, he was on a 1-year deal, so it's not a shock to anybody that he moved on. He went over to Poland. Danny Trejo scored 19 goals last season. Manuel Arteaga, the team agreed a deal to send him over to Tampa Bay. That was for reasons for himself, but look, he scored 15 goals last year. Yes, they replaced him during the course of the postseason. He didn't play as many games then. You did see more from Darius Formella, even though, again, this is a guy who will tell you. And once Tomas Angel came in, he is not really a number 9.
Yeah.
He is more of a winger than a 9. But Manuel Arteaga scores 15 goals. You have to replace that. Yeah. And the biggest problem, more than anything, is that Phoenix Rising didn't make that replacement. Now, the rationale that we've all been given, and a lot of that comes from a fans Q&A that was held at the beginning of September, and it was sporting director Brandon McCarthy, mostly, who was giving this explanation, who said that the team looked at options that were available over the winter. They weren't really convinced by the options. They decided they were going to hold out until the summer because they felt there were going to be more options available then. They were also banking on players from within the team to take a step up. And now this is the one where they completely lose us.
Yeah.
And that is when Brandon McCarthy suggests that Erickson Gallardo could have been a replacement for Danny Trejo. Now that's Erickson Gallardo, who has scored 25 goals in his entire career, scored 1 in a Phoenix Rising shirt, was going to be a potential replacement for Danny Trejo, who scored 19 goals last season alone.
Here's the thing. I get finding a striker's hard. It's probably the toughest position to find a quality player for this level in. It's not going to be easy to replace.
They're also the most overpriced players all the time.
Exactly. It's not going to be easy. But to say to me personally that Erickson Gallardo is your replacement for Danny Trejo, Trejo was one of the most clinical players I think we've seen in a Rising shirt. Some of the goals that he was able to put in. I mean, the one I think of most is the Orange County playoff game, that first goal where he just slots it through. I think it was Colin Shuttler in goal for that game. He just slots it through his legs. It was just goals like that. And I'm not trying to tear down Gallardo, but the finishing was not there.
It was never there.
It was never there. One goal. Who did he score it against? Because I don't remember pointing...
he just didn't score that many goals. It wasn't who he was. And it's why when you see that comparison being made and that talk of, well, does he step up? Maybe he finds a way. It was against Memphis in a 6-0 win, by the way. A 6-0 win, which kind of tells you a lot. Maybe he'll step up. He'll be the guy to be Danny Trejo. It's such an astounding statement to make. You almost have to ask that, what sport are you watching?
Yeah.
I mean, I have spoken to several people from around the league after that comment, and all of them just find it hilarious because it just doesn't add up. How could you possibly expect a guy who, he missed a fair few games last season, and maybe you see how he plays in the playoffs, predominantly as a bench player, I might add, which is a role that many people have advocated for him playing for a while as the pacey guy off the bench.
Yeah.
That he was going to be Danny Trejo Mark II, or that he was at least going to contribute enough that maybe one or two other guys add a little bit more and suddenly you're in a position where you've replaced Trejo by parts. I just don't see it.
If they had signed Gallardo prior to this season, I could maybe understand the rationale. I get the goal scoring resume wasn't there, but you haven't seen him play in USL. I could maybe get it. But you saw him last year. I don't get it. I mean, Thomas's comment here, all he had was pace. Even the crossing was poor. I mean, there were times last year where Rising put in a ton of crosses. It's just an absurd amount. And it was mainly off the boot of Gallardo. And how many of them did he actually complete? And that whole Rising team, to be fair, last year and at times this year, did play way too many crosses. Couldn't find an idea. Played way too many crosses and struggled to complete them. But like this season, at times we talked about Gallardo turning into that sub because he had the pace. There wasn't much else there. I just do not understand that comment by Brandon there at all under any reasoning to me.
It's just such a weird one, isn't it? I mean, who else in the team really are you looking to and you think really is gonna step up at that point as well? Like Darius Formella was one that was put forward, but
I mean,
but even then,
his goal scoring record isn't that prolific. It's good, but it's not that good.
Right.
Trejo's goal scoring record last season was great. That was a great season for Trejo. Formella really hasn't had that. Yes, he was great down the stretch for Rising last year, but you can't sustain that over 34 matches with how his career's been to this point. I just don't get that move at all.
It's just I don't know. It's a strange one to me.
Yeah.
And the thing is that goals are your primary currency. Let's be perfectly honest here. It's not as though, if you're going to shortchange on anything, it can't be actually putting the ball in the back of the net. I mean, that's the thing that A is going to win you games and B is going to actually pay the bills. You were actually bringing up Ericsson Gallardo with a crossing. Do you want me to give you the stats now from last year?
Oh, gosh.
83 crosses, of which 24 were successful.
Yeah.
Patty just put a bit in the chat there. Replacing Trejo is hard. That's why we needed a minimum of 2 Remy Cabrals, not 1. But Brandon arrogantly thought we could cope. I think the other part to that, obviously, is you need to think about the moving it off and pushing it off until the summer kind of aspect of this. The hope was really this team was going to be able to tread water. They were going to be able to find a way to keep themselves in contention. Maybe not right up at the top, but say hanging around that like 4 to 6 kind of mark. And then you get a guy in who comes in August, and you know what? He's going to set the league alight over that last 2 months. This guy's going to play like, I mean, to give you an example, Darren Mattocks. He came in late, right? He was scoring every other game for Phoenix Rising in that last 2 months of the regular season, back when he came in 2021. And yeah, he had his own issues at this team, but that's separate. When he was actually on the field, he found a way to put the ball in the back of the net. If you can do that, then great. You're giving yourself such an advantage in the running. But that's A, taking the gamble that you're going to manage to tread water, and B, taking the gamble. Well, it's 3 parts to it. B, that it actually, you can make a deal happen in the summer. One deal fell through this summer. We know that for a striker. Bobby Dulle, the club president, has been quite public with that they were in for a guy and it fell apart because of the way that things were going with the team that he was attached with at that time in Europe. And C, putting a gamble on the fact that the guy you bring in is going to, in a short space of time, hit form, be good enough to turn things around. And on all 3 counts, the gamble did not really pay.
Yeah.
There's the problem, right? Rising were chasing. When they were looking for a striker to bring in, they were chasing a playoff place. They were below that playoff line. That is not a position you can afford to be in. They had the one deal fall through, as we said. And then when they did finally get someone to bring in, Thomas Angel, who comes in on loan, you're looking for him to hit form. And as we said earlier, 15 games, 3 goals, 2 of them are penalties.
Yeah.
That is not the form of a game-changing player that you bring in late in the season when you cannot find goals. And the result is simple. Phoenix Rising scored almost twice as many goals last season as they did this year. Phoenix Rising scored less than 1 goal per game this season. That is the lowest rate of any team to make it into the playoffs this year. Goal scoring was a nightmare for this team.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, the approach the club took wasn't going to work. And I feel like it was pretty obvious to a lot of people early doors. It was going to be a struggle.
Yeah. I mean, going back to that Darren Maddox, when he came in 2021, this is a guy who played in MLS. He was solid in MLS. He played for Jamaica. Angel does not have that same pedigree. Yes, Angel's younger than Maddox was when he came in here, but Maddox had pedigree, and you could hope on him to deliver because he's delivered performances at high levels. Angel hasn't. He came in with 12 professional goals and 60 appearances, which I'm not knocking him for, but that is not the signing that is going to set this league afire and push you over the playoff line, push you for a playoff run. I just don't get that. I don't get it. I don't get any of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and it feels as though just a lot of, and I mean, look, again, part of this is obviously this is meant to be a Juan Guerra team.
Yeah.
A lot of the offseason recruitment was built with that in mind. It was built so that you would have Juan as the coach. That didn't happen. However, again, you go back to comments that we've heard from Brandon McCarthy in the past, the sporting director. He became sporting director before the 2023 season. And in an interview he gave with Backfield ahead of this season, said about how you couldn't have a situation where, you know, a coach goes out the door and there goes your IP with him, right? Yeah. That you're starting again from scratch. The problem is then when you then turn that around, and now we're trying to talk about this and saying, well, Juan Guerra's departure really hit this club, this and that and the other, and then some people bring it up more than others from within the club. You know, it's one of those things that even if it, I mean, you know how those discussions go. Sometimes it gets brought up and it's just, well, you know, I'm not making excuses, but, and then they hand you an excuse. You can't do that when one of your stated goals of the sporting department and having a sporting director at the club is that you're going to be able to weather that storm. That's not an excuse you can then pull out at that point, because you've said your entire building of the staff around was meant to be so that when this happened, which again, inevitably it's going to happen. I'll be honest, Pau Ducar, right? He's been interviewing for MLS jobs. If he ends up coming here to Phoenix Rising, the reporting from Tom Berger is correct. Yeah. He ends up being the head coach here. Do you think after one season, if he does really well, he's still going to be here? Or do you think that those MLS clubs who are already interviewing him for jobs are going to be probably coming in? You're going to be in a similar situation potentially in a year's time. And if they can't cope with this now, what makes you think that they're going to be substantially better in just 2 years' time?
And that's the thing with USL is you are always in danger of anything going to a higher level. Players, we've seen that this year. We've seen a head coach leave. And with the rumors of a potential stadium, there could be a club coming to a higher level. And that could really cause Rising some harm. And you need to find a way to cope. And I this season, Rising took the test and they failed it. And they'll have another test next year. And hopefully they get a better score than a 3 out of 4. I mean, it's just... They need to do.
We're dropping that 3 out of 4.
We have to.
We got no Mr. Simpson here tonight. That's a shame.
He's definitely watching though, but
Max is watching from afar. You'd hope. I'm sure he is. Ad man himself.
I know
this is going to be a very long, very strange, potentially even off season coming up. There are a lot of changes around this club. We know, for example, that Pablo Pritchard has taken over as the principal owner of the team, which means that he owns a pretty decent chunk of this squad now. He has the power to bind the team in decision making. He's going to have some decisions to make because we're at a point now whereby there's obviously large amounts of distrust from elements of the fan base. That's been evident for months. That is nothing new. The kind of comments we're getting in our chat today, you know, the comments about wanting Bobby out, about wanting Brandon out, those are comments that we have seen every single week for the past however many months. Eventually that you'd have thought would have to come to a head at some point, and the club really needs to make its decision of, you know, what's going to happen. Are you really going to stick by these guys? Are you not? The simple fact is that since Brandon McCarthy's taken over as sporting director, the club has finished 6th and 10th. It's what I mean. I've discussed this before, but I always find it intriguing because he comes in with the data analytical approach, right? He brings in the quote unquote Moneyball approach in this one. Of course, Phoenix Rising are one of the biggest spenders in the league. The reality is, sorry, 6th and 8th, not 6th and 10th. I'm thinking of the Rick Chance here. The reality is this a team that paid 8th place wages this year?
No.
No, of course it's not. Is this a team that probably paid 6th place wages last year? No. They had the foundation of a team that was being built last year, and this year just put it back into reverse. And the biggest problem is they just didn't really replace key pieces that left. When you have a foundation there, you need to build on that. But the problem was this foundation started to crack, and they just kind of went, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
That's the reality of what we witnessed this year. It's disappointment at every level. I think this club has, again, the football has been, quite frankly, boring at times. That's something that I've heard from inside the club as well. There's an acknowledgement of the fact that it's boring.
Yeah.
The crowd sizes have not been great. The club has brought more money in, more than the paltry little increase of 150 people per game that they have actually. But that's because they've gotten rid of discounts. The thing about getting rid of discounts is there's only so much that you can raise revenue by increasing prices, especially if the football is, quite frankly, boring. Yeah. You can't balance those things very well going forward. I don't know. I have serious questions. I just wonder about the direction of this club. I understand that, they're extending their time at the current stadium. A good part of that is going to be presumably because they are on the hunt for a permanent location. Indications I've heard from sources within the club are that they are trying to look for a permanent site. But I don't know. It's the idea that stuff all remains kind of off in the distance, often vague, and the fact that at any time a development could come on an MLS team or an NWSL team that really puts you in danger as a football club. You can't afford to just kind of play this game whereby, 5 years down the line, maybe we'll have an answer for that one. You need answers sooner rather than later.
I mean, just, you don't want to be like Loyal. That's really it. I mean, they were stuck at Torero Stadium, and now they don't exist anymore.
Indeed. Some of the comments in here now, Thomas, with they really fumbled the championship tour for new fans. That's very true.
Yeah.
This was a big opportunity, I think, to grow this club. You have the opportunity of winning a title and going out there and showing it. You needed to be competitive this year. Bandidos Bluebird adding to that one. We've thrown away a major opportunity to grow the club this season. That is predominantly down to the failings of Bobby and Brandon. Sayali saying they have lost our trust. Yeah, it's we knew there were going to be negative vibes in this one. Yeah. There always are going to be after, I think, an unexpected, expected based on the last 6 months of football that we've watched, but not when we go back to preseason and what you were hoping for. We knew there were issues in this team. We didn't know that things were going to quite end up, I think, being this dismal. The hope was that new signings were coming in at a sooner than they ultimately did. And I mean, we've said this before. We know that there were people within the coaching staff who were definitely wanting those signings sooner rather than later, and the finger that they were pointing was generally upstairs as to why those weren't happening. I will say there, producer Kyle in there with a hit the like button for negative vibes. I mean,
it's not a somber Saturday.
We gotta have that cathartic kind of one though, don't we? Every so often, you gotta get it off the chest. After a season like this, people aren't going to be happy. Very justifiably, they're not going to be happy, and that's why you end up things like a tifo going up in the middle of the season, calling for people to go. Yeah,
and we saw that in 2022 too.
We did see that in 2022. That's the thing. I actually think this was a more miserable season than 2022. In 2022, there was, at least by the end of the year, far more of a positive vibe around the fact that, well, you know what? There was a plan going forward. A new coach had been brought in August. Someone that the fans believed in was coming in with his own ideas. And even though they weren't there right then, you could sense things potentially being about to turn around. But that kind of feeling just doesn't quite exist right now. And it doesn't exist right now because the people that are getting, I think, from the fan base, and understandably so, a lot of the blame are still there.
Yeah. Well, like in 2022, you said there was a plan. There was a plan. There was a plan for the future. There were guys brought in like Gabby Torres. Obviously, the main one, Juan Guerra. Now, I get Joel and Darius came in this year, but who's going to manage them next year?
Well,
Yes, the
right.
rumors, but
There is the reporting on that. But even then, I mean, the question is just a new head coach just papering over the cracks?
yeah.
Like, are the issues in this club deeper than that? And a lot of people do believe that they are deeper than that. This is going to be I imagine, a topic of conversation for. We got a long time until this season comes back.
Yeah.
Actually, preseason will be starting up in January, I suppose. So there's only about 2 months for that, maybe.
Oh, I can't wait to
there'll
watch
be new signings
preseason
coming along.
friendlies.
There will be movement on that one. But you know what? After 35 games. 37 if you count the Open Cup as well. The season has finally come to an end. I added up those numbers, didn't I, Rees?
Yeah.
And if you just took those flights that I took around watching this team, I could have circumnavigated the planet 1.9 times. It was a lot.
Jeez.
I tell you what, I'm going to enjoy getting some sleep after this one. We will be back at it on Wednesday this week. And the ad man himself is going to come along and take part in that one.
He's back from vacation?
I believe Adman is back from
Wow.
vacation. I am looking for confirmation to our producer Kyle. Do we know? I think he's back on Wednesday. I hope he's back on Wednesday. No, I've said it.
I'm not sure.
Well,
She said he was back on Wednesday.
Always on vacation.
He is always
That
on
is true.
vacation. He might. Who knows? Look, we'll see how that goes, but we're gonna have more to talk about with Max. We're gonna have some more fun things to come up as well. I know we're gonna be doing our end of season awards. It might seem a bit.
Yeah. That's going to be fun, isn't it?
It's fine. Hey, there are still some things to celebrate. There's still some players to celebrate.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Who have come on, who have had some really good seasons here, who have made an impression, on the fan base. And again, I think we saw that yesterday. Look, the number of guys I saw walking past me who just looked utterly distraught coming off that field last night. Some of them looked, quite frankly, close to tears. It was a rough way for the season to end. I do think they left it all out on the field there. And again, the issues with this club go higher than any individual players on that team. But we will be back on Wednesday. We will have that kind of discussion there about all of those fun things. Rees, any other last thoughts you really want to get off your chest?
Rising's cooked and so is Arsenal, so I'm just miserable.
Oh,
right
you're
now.
having a great
Yeah,
time. So
just
producer Carl,
miserable.
that's dismal.
Yeah.
That's dismal. I mean,
How's Cardiff?
the vibes are actually quite good right now. We're playing okay. We're getting some wins. It's going well. We came back to win against Norwich on the weekend with an 89th minute and a 90+3 goal.
Oh, wow. No.
So, the vibes are actually good for Cardiff right now. Yeah?
That's a miracle, to be honest.
I know.
Wow.
Wouldn't you like some of those vibes there, Rees?
Yeah, I would.
With any of the clubs that you watch.
Literally anything.
Indeed.
In any sport.
Indeed, you will. And you know what? We were talking about it earlier, but if you want those good vibes, remember, you have very little time remaining to hop on our introductory offer to become a PHNX diehard. $4 per month for those first 12 months. That gets you access to all of the written content on the website, gets you into our members-only Discord, where, you can lament the season that's passed. We do this as a group. You can also shout at Adman and ask why he's not here. I mean, sometimes it helps.
Yeah, there's a different answer every week.
There is a different answer every week from him. You also get a free t-shirt from the PHNX Locker when you sign up. So make sure to go and check that out now, because again, you only have tonight to get that done. Right. Well, I think, Rees, that is drawing us now towards our conclusion here tonight. Again, as I said, we will be back on Wednesday at 6 o'clock, our usual time, although on a slightly different day. Although we may be moving to Wednesdays for the off season. So we'll see. We'll see how that one goes. It'd be a bit weird, I think, Wednesdays.
Weird Wednesdays? Is that
Weird
what we're calling it?
Wednesdays. Yeah, we'll take that. It's a weird season, so you know what?
Yeah.
We'll take that. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at PHNX__rising. Double the underscores, Rees.
double the goals next season.
That would be nice. That would be really nice. That would be really, really nice to get more than the 34 goals over 35 games that they scored this. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at OJEvans18. You can follow Rees on Twitter at Rees11_. You can follow Max on Twitter, but I'm not sure why you'd want to because he's not here. You can follow Kyle on Twitter at KCoopSports. And yeah, this has been a cathartic one, hasn't it? It has been.
Yeah.
I feel like this has gotten a lot off the chest. Go check out, by the way, I did write a column on the season and how things have gone. That's over on our website at gophnx.com. So go check that out if you haven't already given it a read. And come back with your thoughts again. We'll be on this on Wednesday, I'm sure. Maybe look at some of those other games that are coming up in the USL Championship playoffs that we will not be a part of. Until then, it is a beauty. Are we going to do the Max sign off?
Is it a beautiful game though?
I mean, it would be.
It's not though.
No.
It's an ugly game.
No, it's not really a beautiful game. All right. Well, we're not going to. Yeah, to be fair, we've watched a lot of football that is not very beautiful this season. So we'll just leave you with a message that, you know what? This has been a show. This has been a season. Games have happened. And from your supporters correspondence here. Good night.
We all silly like the mayor.